I think 60, 70% of the investment in AI is actually in the US. The good news for Vietnam is, even though we're 1/6 of the population here in Southeast Asia, about 100 million of us in the country, half of all the students from the region that are in the US are from Vietnam, right? And because of filial piety and sort of all these things, a lot of them will end up working there for a while and end up coming back, right? So we have this reverse brain drain in a lot of cases, because folks like me who went earlier and spent most of my life there are also coming back, and so we have this massive influx of folks coming back, built on top of a schooling system that is very, very STEM and math-centric. And as you know, the underlying work in AI is essentially a math problem, right? And so I think Vietnam is going to be able to punch above its weight when it comes to more of the technical aspects of AI.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. So just to set the scene, as I'm sure everyone knows, it's been a pretty turbulent global environment for investing in recent years. But against that backdrop, APAC has remained relatively resilient. I want to start with Justin, Chan Yip, and Ren Yong, because you all work in the funding landscape in some way, and then Juhi will come to you in a second. In which sectors are you seeing the most transformation as a result of AI? And Justin, let's start with you.
Okay. So I'm pretty broad. I think AI is actually going to touch all aspects of our life. I don't think there's such thing as going to be an AI quote-unquote first company. I think we're going to embed it into just like mobile, right? That came before it, or the internet. So I think it's going to be quite broad. However, to get to specifically, I think they're immediate in our sort of immediate future. I think around education, anywhere we can have relationships with people, right? And certainly anything around content is going to change very, very drastically. I think healthcare actually is going to change pretty drastically. So roughly those are kind of the three immediate ones, but I think it's going to touch broad aspects of our lives, quite honestly.
Can you talk to me a bit about education, the specifics of what you're seeing there and what could be possible?
Yeah. So we have a portfolio company that actually helps people pronounce English better. So it doesn't teach them vocabulary and grammar. And previous to this, they've been around for a while. Previous to this, they were mostly lesson-based. But now you have the ability to say, okay, I'm gonna go do a brainstorm AI session tomorrow. Do a mock interview with me, or I'm gonna go interview for a job as a controller. Do a mock interview with me, and they've incorporated that into their product. And actually, almost overnight, their AOV, their average order value, doubled, right? And so what happens is, lesson-based, you can only get so far of that. Now the scenarios are limitless, right? And so it becomes a useful everyday type product. And so that's one very concrete example that's actually out there already, right? With our company, Nelsa. But I think it's got to be quite broad, right? For years, it's been things have been sort of narrowed down to transactions, and now we can have these longer relationships, and that's essentially what we're seeing as products becoming relatable to us and talking to us like we talk to each other, right? So.
Chan Yip, Ren Yong, where are you seeing the most transformation?
Yeah, perhaps I can start first. So for me, I think I've been seeing more transformation in B2B sales, as well as potentially venture capital as well. So we ourselves, we are actually using LLM to help us to identify companies that are interesting to see. So if you look at the life cycle of a venture capital, it's essentially sourcing, picking the right company, then eventually building together with the entrepreneur, as well as harvesting at the end through an exit. So the first two buckets in terms of identifying the company, as well as doing the analysis on the company, LLM have the potential to actually help us. And so far, we have been testing and building our own models. We have been able to identify quite interesting companies out there. So we teach the model what kind of companies or what kind of traits that we want to see. Then we ask the LLM to help us to rank from 1 to 100 the score. Then from that score, then we will know which one to prioritize, then eventually go and reach out to some of these companies. So far, it has been quite fruitful. So we managed to find interesting companies that we have missed in the past. But right now with this, then in terms of ability to capture more companies, I think it can be quite transformational for us.
And is it speeding up the process as well? Is it changing the timelines of how you work?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of deal sourcing, it's speeding up because in terms of in the past, what we have done, right, is that we try to reach out to as many companies as possible. So we wouldn't really have much information about that company, whether it is something that we should be prioritizing or meet first. So with this LLM, in terms of the ability to score some of these companies, right? So right now, we are able to prioritize which one should we actually reach out to first. So I think that part, at least for us so far, in the 6 months that we have been trying, it has been quite interesting. We haven't really invested in one in which it came from this LM in terms of deal sourcing. But perhaps maybe 1 year from now, maybe we have a new story to tell.
That's so fascinating. Ran Young.
Yeah, I think, just building on what Justin and Charlie have mentioned, I think if you take a step back, companies that have adopted generative AI the fastest are those that have moved to the cloud earliest, right? So you look at the e-commerce players, it's much more easy for them to adopt generative AI. Secondly, in this phase, I also think that the professional services sector has a lot of opportunity as well, from legal, accounting, as well as what Charlie is mentioning, financial research analysts. If you look at the costs in the last 10 years, the cost of producing services goods have declined, but the salaries of software engineers or professionals have gone up. And I think this is the way where that will change. So as an example, we invested in a company called Robin AI that does AI-enabled contract review and translation. We always say that the best AI model is the business model. So essentially, what they have done is replace a service to charging per user, by output, and by outcome. I think that's transformational. We also have another company that one of our funds invested in that's in stealth mode right now, that's looking to automate workflows within accounting and tax preparation, which means the agent will work like an accountant and still use QuickBooks. We're not replacing QuickBooks, we're replacing a workflow. So essentially, I think within the professional services space, there will be workflows that will be replaced by certain agents or autonomous type of AI-enabled software. And I think to what Charlie mentioned on financial research and analysts, I also recently saw a company that used agentic AI frameworks to create more like a financial research analyst. It was pretty good when I tried it. So those were I think, sort of my perspectives.
Workflows being replaced rather than roles, as it were.
Exactly. So workflows within professional services, where hallucination is a feature, not a risk. Right? The early part of your discovery within your workflow, you actually want hallucination, right? And then that is sort of like, those are workflows that I think will get generally replaced by potential a new AI-enabled, AI first is what Justin said, software.
Now, Juhi, you have a different perspective, I imagine, to your fellow speakers. Can you talk us through a bit how, in your role at IBM, you're interacting with AI on a daily basis, both internally and also outwardly facing with your clients?
Very good, yeah. First of all, I mean, I agree with all my colleagues here. They've made some excellent points. I would say, look, the CEOs, we've done a study that says 60% of CEOs are getting pressure from their investors, my colleagues here and others, to do something about AI, right? And when the CEO gets pressure, 60 to 65% of them are being forced to do something. They want to react to the investors. So when you are in react mode, what happened? For the last 3 to 4 years, we saw a lot of POCs, right? There was a lot of proof of concepts, a lot of trial and some error, and learning from that. So what I am seeing in the last 6 months is a bit of a shift there. So there are still POCs going on, driving innovation and investments from my colleagues here. But we are seeing companies, especially large enterprises, really embrace AI very seriously. And to your point, not just changing an application, but their end-to-end processes. To give you a couple of examples, we have completely changed our HR process. Now we have something called Ask HR, and we would, as we're 300,000 employees, we have a lot of questions to ask. We're a people company. So the Ask HR process has really accelerated our time to value from an HR perspective. Our entire procurement process, right? Our contracting, you have some really basic things that have been so super automated that the time, again, to do the boring tasks and leave the humans to do the value-added tasks is how we're seeing a big change internally. Those are just some examples. Externally, I see a lot of adoption happening in code generation. So, right, like the engineers who are generating code now are seeing almost 80% productivity because a lot of the code is auto-generated, and they only need to ensure that the code is good. We're seeing a lot of adoption in banking and financial services, again, in risk management and growth. We're seeing growth in healthcare. I think that point you made, Justin, in healthcare, we're seeing a lot of innovation happening in messenger RNA development. So I would say our CEO says that we're expecting $4 trillion in productivity to happen in the world from Gen AI. 4 trillion, gentlemen, get your pockets ready. But also, we're seeing a lot of growth happening in business model disruptions. I do want to share at some point, if appropriate, what are some of the inhibitors that are coming in the way of this scaling and even faster innovation. But I want to make sure we have a balanced perspective here.
Let's talk about those inhibitors. Okay, so maybe outline a couple of them, Juhi, and then I'd love to get your perspective as well on whether you agree. So maybe name 2 or 3 of the kind of the most challenging ones that you're seeing at the moment.
I would say I'm seeing 3 inhibitors. The first one is skills, AI skills, and look, this is upon all of us to elevate the entire world. IBM's made a commitment to train 30 million people, 1 million women in APAC, 30 million globally on Gen AI. So skills and AI skills, and I'd love alternate perspectives on how do we all raise the watermark here, right, on skills. One thing I love about AI is it's inclusive. You don't have to be a software developer to embrace AI, right? Like our children are writing AI apps. I have a cool daughter, so, but seriously, like it allows everyone to participate. So what is coming in the way? What is this inhibition that's holding people back, and how do we empower them to embrace it and do something with it? Use the agents that are available to us, right, in simple ways. So skills is one. I think the second is cost. We do know that 40% of IT budgets are shifting to Gen AI. What does that mean? Data is going to be everywhere. So how do you balance the investments you're making in Gen AI with the value that you're getting? And it always has to be this way, right? The value has to be higher than the cost. And honestly, the third thing I'm seeing is concerns around privacy, security, fairness, ethical AI, governance. So if you put all of that together, you have to ensure that there are no biases in AI. Is it accurate? We've all heard about all the breaches. In fact, you and I were flying at the time when the big breach happened with CrowdStrike. So how do you ensure when your data is more out there, data is moving more to the edge, how can we ensure that that's secure and all the way through? So skills, balancing cost and value, and the third would be privacy, ethical, governed AI.
And you mentioned as well the huge amount of growth that your CEO is expecting to unlock as a result of Gen AI. And Justin, I'd love to know from you, what do you look for in terms of key indicators of sustainable competitive advantage in AI when you're thinking about investing in various companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually I think it's a pretty tough time, actually, to be an investor in AI right now.
Yeah.
I was saying earlier, I've been around since the early days of the internet, and the applications and the usage of what the technology, 5, 10, 20 years from now, it's unimaginable today, actually, to us. And so that's kind of nice. We get to sit here and see it. But to be a little bit more specific, right now, it's very, very difficult to see what is the thin layer on top of what IBM is doing, Google's doing, AWS is doing, a thin layer on something that's pretty commoditized, right, on these large language models, and what is truly valuable, right? And I think at the end of the day, it'll come down to data and how you use that data. When anyone can prompt, then what is proprietary to you, and how do you go about collecting, amassing, and getting results from that data, right? I think ultimately it comes to that. Almost a lot of what we see, a lot of the investing that we see out there are just thin layers on top. They're just new interfaces for prompting, actually, right? And so how do you move beyond that is sort of the immediate first steps. But actually, I'm super excited at what's coming next. The early days of the internet and of the web, actually, and I was around then, completely unobvious. We knew you could feel that it was something there that was going to change your life, but it was totally unobvious. Obviously, Gen AI has a much bigger aha moment. You can see it right away that it's going to be big. But once again, how it impacts us right now, imagination is kind of all you can do. Right.
And Chanya, what are the most successful CEOs and founders doing at the moment with regards to data, but also across the board to make sure that they're positioning their companies as one of the ones that does unlock this huge potential growth?
Yeah, so I think so far the best example publicly would be Klarna, right? So whereby they actually managed to kind of use AI to do customer service, but then improve it in a way that the response time to customer actually significantly decreased from 40 minutes to 2 minutes. So that is what we have seen that is in public. But at the same time, within the Vertex portfolio, we actually do have this company called StoreHub in Malaysia. So StoreHub, you can think of them like a equivalent of Square in the US. They provide point of sales terminals to F&B operators. So for them to do sales, they actually need to hire a bunch of sales development reps to do cold calls, to reach out to potential customers, then eventually to convert them. So the problem that they faced in the past would be it's hard for them to actually understand the performance of the SDRs until like 3 to 6 months later, because they aren't able to sit down with each of the SDR to understand how are they pitching to the potential customers. But with Gen AI and LLM come into place, then right now they're actually able to track. So by tracking what they say within the call, so they can quickly do rectification, right? Like if this particular person is not selling the right messages, they can actually tell and retrain the person in order to help them to increase the conversion. So far, in terms of results, has been quite positive. So they were able to increase the conversion rate by 30% and able to cover the number of calls from 2% to 70%. So the other 30% they weren't able to do so is because the data clarity is not there. So that has been, I think, quite transformational for the company, because they are able to reduce the cost of acquisition down by quite a bit.
Ren-Yong, can you talk us through a bit how you go about valuing an AI startup?
Yeah. Firstly, this is a very difficult question to ask.
It's why I asked it.
Yes. And if you look at the valuation metrics, they really are very, very wide-ranging. Instead of asking that, we ask ourselves, where is the value? Where does the value accrue, right? See, if you look at like what Justin had mentioned earlier, it's not an easy time for investors. Now, of course, as we look at any AI company, by now you would have heard that 3 very important components: talent, data, compute, right? And of course, the capital provision is also very important. But we ask ourselves, where does the moat accrue? Where is the value? And I'll submit to you that the moat is not really in the data, it's in the customers. Because the generative AI company of the future, the data that is being queried has already been put in infrastructure. What is important is that you need the channel that you engage the consumers in order to be able to generate data, new data that's fresh, that's able to build value in the mode that you want to accrue. Very conceptual. Let me give you some examples, right? We always say that we look for companies that are product forward. Not product centric, not data centric, but product forward.
What does that mean?
What does that mean, right? Let me unpack that for you. So GitHub Copilot, as Juhi rightly pointed out, it was started up not looking at all the code that's in GitHub. It started with what the developers need. That's product centric. But product forward is to know that because we know LLM cost is declining by a factor of 99.5% in the last 1 year, you have to imagine what is the future going to be 5 years later and build your product for that. So GitHub, I believe, is in such a position because it knows what its customers want. It has a talent to forecast forward. It has a compute to be able to test that, right? The other example we have is a company we built in Singapore called Minden AI that launched U Rewards Club, YUU. It's a rewards loyalty coalition. On the surface, it just looks like a coalition, but the back end, we've built an AI system that basically tries to launch different AI products out to different slices of consumers for where it matters to you. So for example, we launched a shopping list to a slice of consumers where it matters for them, and we want to make it more automated. Of course, the chatbot has been launched as well, but many people do that. But essentially, you want to create and architect a system where you go broad, I call it a T, not for Temasek, but a T. You go broad, you innovate on product, and you go deep in where you think your advantages would be, where your competitive differentiation would be. And that's, I think, a bit what Juhi mentioned. Organizationally, we need to look at how to enable organizations to do that. Go broad to innovate, enable that innovation, and go deep in 2 areas where we actually double down on that.
That's so interesting.
Can I add to
Yeah,
it?
of course.
First of all, I love that my financial colleagues are talking about large language models. How cool is that, right, guys? So
I'm an engineer by training.
okay, so there you go. Okay, qualifier. But I was trying to avoid being techie, so thank you for opening that up for me. But I do think, to your point, I wanted to add that, look, the large language models are excellent, and we're seeing efficiencies happen from them. But there are a lot of smaller language models that are also, to your point on data, right? You could get a better ROI from a small language model as well. So, let's look at both. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there is, I think you were making that point on outcome-based value. So earlier, a lot of our pricing is, done by cost plus or customer acquisition cost. I mean, again, different manifestations of cost plus, but I think that would also be sort of not product forward or not visionary, because a lot of the value is still to be unleashed. And, to your point, we don't even know where the value will come from yet. So this whole outcome-based business models and pricing are also another area that I just wanted to, sort of double down on your points, that let's look at small models, let's look at different pricing models and value creation models. And then the last thing I'd say is there's a lot of opportunity to innovate, and really a commitment to open source and open ways of doing things is really where we as a world and an economy will thrive, right? So this is not where, hey, this is my model, I'm going to hold on to it. This is like, if a developer in Asia writes code, a developer in the US can look at it overnight while they sleep and bring value to it. So it's really creating like a global pool of people and tools and access through like a lot of this open innovation to all the companies my colleagues mentioned. But I do think that we are going to see a substantial improvement in the world based on this open model.
But just quickly, how do you do that when you've got the two massive superpowers, these two power blocks kind of really running the show, as it were? How do you foster that global openness?
I think technology and AI is going to be democratizing. I really believe that. And there's no way when you're, like IBM built this Granite model, and now we've opened it up to the world, right? And it doesn't stop at a startup. It doesn't stop somebody sitting in, Guangzhou, China. It doesn't stop a developer in Poland. So I do think that through technology and its democratization and the skills and people creating value, we are going to see a much more collaborative world, building this kind of, driving the right outcomes for the world. And also, if you see the banking innovation, as I mentioned, as just an example, because this is happening more in the open way, it's not holding things back. People want to learn from each other because the value that's going to unfold is so enormous and so unknown. At this moment, what advise a lot of CEOs and C-suite, even CFOs, I'm seeing people craving best practices from around the world versus sort of a protectionism mindset. Because, with so much money and investment going in this space, even IBM launched a $500 million fund again to support OpenAI, not as large as probably my colleagues here. But again, I do think that, and it's not constrained. It's not like it can only be in the US and it can only be this. It's basically aligned with our values of sustainability, open, innovation.
We've only got a few more minutes, so I'm going to finish with some sort of quick fire-ish questions. Chanya, let's start with you. When we talk about investing in APAC, we're talking about a lot of very diverse countries there. If we're looking ahead to the next year, are there one or two markets within APAC that you think we should keep an eye on for particular growth in AI?
Yeah, we were just discussing with Justin, right, that right now, in terms of Asia Pacific, or specifically Southeast Asia, because both of us actually cover the Southeast Asia market a little bit more. Right now, it feels like if you look back at the mobile days, whereby mobile started in 2008, Uber started in 2009, and then Grab started in 2012. So that means we are in the phase whereby a lot of the developments are actually happening in the Western world, and we in Asia is trying to really understand what exactly is the implication right now. And perhaps maybe within 1 to 2 years' time, we will see companies that are indigenous to Southeast Asia just like Grab, by having a twist to it whereby it makes them different compared to the Western counterpart. So I think that it's important to learn this particular trend right now. For us as VC, we are always meeting with companies to see what's the latest innovation. And what we would like to see is companies that actually have differentiation when they go out and compete. Because at the end of the day, in order to succeed, you need to have some advantages. Otherwise, you run into price war, which is something that we do not want to see our portfolio companies go into.
Justin, other than Singapore, which countries in the region do you think are showing that differentiation?
Yeah, so I'm from our Vietnam office. If you can't tell by my last name, Nguyen, I'm Vietnamese. It's probably 40% of the population. So I'll make a quick plug for Vietnam, actually. So as we know, I think yesterday there was a panelist that was up here that was talking about, I think 60-70% of the investment in AI is actually in the U.S. And the good news for Vietnam is, even though we're 1/6 of the population here in Southeast Asia, about 100 million of us in the country, half of all the students from the region that are in the US are from Vietnam, right? And because of filial piety and sort of all these things, a lot of them will end up working there for a while and end up coming back, right? And so we have this reverse brain drain in a lot of cases, because folks like me who went earlier and spent most of my life there are also coming back, and so we have this massive influx of folks coming back, built on top of a schooling system that is very, very STEM and math-centric. And as you know, the underlying work in AI is essentially a math problem, right? And so I think Vietnam is going to be able to punch above its weight when it comes to more of the technical aspects of AI. Now, of course, the great, these great big companies are democratizing access to the underlying data and models and whatnot. And so I think good, useful applications will come out of everywhere in the region. But Vietnam in particular, I think, has a bit of an edge when it comes to enough people. Singapore, clearly, but from a population perspective, enough people to do this.
And Juhi, a quick question for you. I know that you're also the co-chair of IBM's Women's Council. And I wonder what trends you're seeing in how generative AI is impacting the careers of women in the region.
Okay. I do think that, and I hate saying it, but I'll say it, I do think women are getting left behind in this journey. The reason is a lot of the women are, not because of education, but a lot of women are doing tasks that are more repetitive. They just end up in those kind of roles. And it really, really breaks my heart and really hurts me to see that women are, there's a potential to leave them behind. So we have embarked on this journey in APAC to ensure that 1 million women and girls are educated on technology and Gen AI. So there's no inhibition. Gen AI is not that hard, right? To use it is not that hard. So we're really putting a lot of effort in ensuring that women have roles where they are part of, the high value roles versus the repetitive tasks, because they will get automated and go away. So this is a journey. I think and I'll ask for everybody here as a society, 23% of the workforce for all of us in this space are women. And really, it keeps me up at night. How do you ensure that they are not left behind? We have a lot of efforts going on. We're working with the Philippines government. We're working with the Penang Ministry of Education. We're working with the Indonesian Ministry of Education. We're working, of course, with Singapore. I think with Temasek, we had launched an initiative as well. So all across, this will have to be grassroots, but we've got to enable our women to keep up, because otherwise it'll be such a travesty to lose such a big talent pool in this, AI win.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, because that's such an important rallying cry to end on, and I wish we could all explore that more. But Juhi, Justin, Chanyip, and Renyong, thank you so much for joining us today. Please find them and continue the conversation if you see them out and about at coffee later. Thank you so much.